Okay, you're going to hear from Whitney and I both today. I'm going to do our devotion this morning. We have a devotion every single week if this is the first time on here. And then Whitney's going to dive into some good stuff as well. So I shot for Diamond last month, as many of you guys know, and I feel like God showed me something right before the 28th. If you're not super familiar with how all of this Plexus stuff works, at the 28th of the month, you know where your points are, and then you know what you need to hit that goal that you have at the end, because that's whenever all subscriptions are done. So then the rest of it is your own work. And on the 27th, I just feel like God showed me something really encouraging and just giving me the faith just to continue to push and work hard and know that I'm capable of doing hard things and working for hard things, and then having the faith that He'll put the pieces together, which is something that I really needed. And it was in the book of Nehemiah, a devotion that I started doing. So this whole past week, I have been studying Nehemiah, and I'm just going to share some of the things that I've learned. If you guys are looking at, the Bible has so many great tips on leadership. It is such an amazing guide to go to, but if you're wanting a guide on leadership and some things to do, I definitely am going to encourage you to spend some time in Nehemiah. And I'm only about halfway through the whole book, so I'm sure there's more good stuff, but we're not going to get to that part today. But one thing about Nehemiah is he was definitely a man of God, and he was always taking action, and he was actually the cupbearer for the king. And during this time period, the walls around Jerusalem had been completely destroyed. They'd been burnt up. They're gone. And this greatly distressed Nehemiah. So one thing that he started to do is he started praying over this, and he started fasting over it. And he was asking for favor for the king, because he had it laid on his heart to go and rebuild these walls of Jerusalem, which is a really big task. But he thought that being a man of action and having the faith in God, this is something that he could get done. So he prayed over this, and he prayed for favor from the king. And so whenever he did this, he was in front of the king and never appeared sad before. And the king had actually asked him what was wrong. So he was terrified, is the word that the Bible gives. He said, "I was terrified, but I replied, 'Long live the king. How can I not be sad? For the city where my ancestors are buried is in ruins, and the gates have been destroyed by fire.'" And then the king actually asked him, "Well, how can I help you?" And so he asked the king if he could go, and if he could go rebuild it. And he asked the king if he could have basically papers to get their territory to territory, so nobody would do it. And the king actually even went further than that, and he gave him protection as he did these things to go from territory to territory. And whenever we get to chapter 2, verse 10, it talks about whenever Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite officially heard of my arrival, they were very displeased that someone had come to help the people of Israel. So he's got this plan, it's laid on his heart, and he's going to rebuild it. And now he has this enemy that did not want him to do it. So he tries to intimidate him into not rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. Go looking over my notes over here. And he reminds him that he was basically telling him, like, you're going against the king. You can't do this. And he reminds him that they have no legal right to Jerusalem. So what he's doing is not going against the king, and he's going to move forward. So he didn't let this intimidation of what God had laid on his heart stop him from moving forward. So, and then we get on to chapter 3. And he's there, and he's telling everybody, like, we're going to rebuild this wall, and they're all ready to like link arms with him and doing it. And this is a really big task that they're doing, rebuilding this wall around Jerusalem. And so what he does is he takes it and he puts people on individual sections near their homes, and he breaks it down into bite-sized pieces in order for them to start rebuilding this wall. Instead of looking at the whole picture at once, they looked at baby steps at once. I'm going to relate all this back to Plexus in just a minute, so just bear with me as I continue to get through this. But he didn't want it to be overwhelming to them. So, and then as we move over into chapter 4, the enemies, we get to the Sanballat guy again, and he starts mocking them, and he starts telling them that it's going to fall down as soon as a fox walks on it. And he tells them that it's never going to stand. They're never going to be able to finish it. And so what he did is he just prayed about it, and he gave this over to the Lord, and asked God to take care of the situation. And he just kind of kept on working. And as we get on to chapter 5, his people are starting to getting discouraged. And he also, the Sanballat guy, also sets up a plot at this time where he's going to try to throw everybody into confusion, try to tell them, he's like declaring war against them, telling them that they're going to come and attack them. And as people start getting scared, so he sits there, and again, Nehemiah takes some action, and he gives them the ammunition, and they start going in shifts, and they've got half of the people working, and then they've got half of the people watching guard over Jerusalem during this time. He did not just simply pray like, God, if it's your will that we do this, just protect us. Don't let anything happen to us. Yes, he prayed. Prayer was always the first thing, but he also took the action, and he set the plans in place on what needed to be done to make sure they were protected. So they worked with a sword in hand at all times, and they worked with people being on guard at all times so they could finish the task at hand while they were protected at the same time. And then if you move over on to chapter 5, then his people they're getting tired, and they're complaining, and they're starting to they're being taxed interest, and they're getting hungry. And so what Nehemiah does is he deprived himself of all the comforts, because he was the official government. So he could tax his people, he could get a food allowance from these people, but he didn't do any of that stuff. He deprived himself of everything because he wanted to, one, relate to the people, but he also wanted to make it as easy as possible on his people as they were building this wall. And then chapter 6 rolls around, and you've got this Sanballat guy coming again and telling him, hey, I need to meet with you. We need to talk about this. And he says, I'm busy. I'm here with busy work. I don't have time to talk to you. So then he comes, and he finally sends a letter to him, and he says, there is a rumor among the surrounding nations, and Geshem tells me it's true that you and the Jews are planning to rebel, and that this is why you are building the wall. According to his reports, you plan to be their king. He also reports that you have appointed prophets in Jerusalem to proclaim about you. Look, there is a king in Judah. You can be very sure that this report will get back to the king. So I suggest that you come and talk to me now. And he replied, there's no truth in any part of your story. You're making the whole thing up. So again, he just tries to intimidate him and get him scared. Like, I don't need you telling the story. That's not true. He wipes it off. There's no truth. And he caught this whole entire time. He has faith that God is going to protect him and take care of the situation for him. And then summing this up, it says, through Nehemiah's visionary leadership and hardened example, the wall around Jerusalem went up in 52 days. When our enemies and surrounding nations heard about it, Nehemiah reports, they were frightened and humiliated. They realized this work had been done with the help of our God. Nehemiah never saw the slightest inconsistency between strong faith and practical get things done attitude. He made frequent use of both prayer and ammunition in that order. Whenever his fellow Jews started sliding towards discouragement, he found concrete ways to pick up their spirits and keep work moving. And that kept him marching ahead. He gave the answer himself to an adversary who disgenuinely requested a meeting. I am engaged in a great work, so I cannot come. Why should I stop working to come meet with you? And the point of this is a practical mind paired with genuine faith can accomplish great things. And one of the reasons I wanted to kind of go over the life of Nehemiah, because I feel like it relates to Plexus so much. We have a lot of us have the strong vision in our heart, and we feel that God has given us this incredible gift, but every time we talked about this before, it's a combination of your efforts and then God's favor and his grace, and combining those together. And praying over your business is something that I do every single day. I pray over my own business. I pray over your guys' business. I pray over this team, but I also put my head down and get to work. And I watch so many people fall down and not get back up because they were intimidated. Somebody said something mean to them. Somebody commented something negative on their post. They had somebody come into their lives that they respected and tell them that they can't do this, that they're not strong enough to do this, that this is not going to work for them. And instead of continuing, because you have this vision and you have this goal, and continuing to do the things every single day, people will fall off and they will not reach the end during that season. Not saying they can't ever come back, because they let something get in the way. And I feel like we can learn with Nehemiah's example is he had this laid on his heart. And he had this goal in mind, and it did not matter what come up against him, that he was still willing to show up every single day and to finish the task at hand. When his people were suffering, he deprived himself. And sometimes as we're building a team, we're the leader, and sometimes we have to deprive ourselves. We have to put in a little bit of extra effort. We have to sacrifice ourselves so we can be there to answer the questions. We have to host the event. And sometimes it's a little bit harder on us, but the end game is worth it whenever we are doing that. And it's like I said, the same thing with the intimidation. Whenever you have somebody that is coming up to you and trying to intimidate you, you guys have heard my story on this. Most of you guys, when I first started, somebody coming and telling me, do not do this. This is not good for you. I've got something better. This will not work. And then moving past that anyway ends with a great result. So I just wanted to end this with giving you guys a little bit of encouragement. I encourage you guys to read the story of Nehemiah and just know that if God's laid it on your heart, you are definitely capable of doing it, and you guys can do hard things and you can work past hard things. And I'm going to encourage you to pray over your business on a regular basis, but not ever being afraid to put in the work, and not ever thinking that if it's meant to be, it's going to happen. If God wants this to happen, then it's going to happen. If I meant to be a diamond, it's going to happen, because I don't think that it works like that. We can't just sit down and just wait and expect things to happen without putting in that genuine effort. But I'm going to pass it over to Whitney, and she's going to get into some good stuff for us.
Well, hi. Okay, so I am a social worker by trade. I've got my master's and took this whole class on CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. And so a couple weeks ago, whenever Amanda and Kara were up here and I was downstairs fixing lunch for everyone, heard them talking. And afterwards I told Kara, I was like, oh, self-sabotage, like that goes right along with cognitive behavioral therapy and cognitive distortions and all of that stuff. So she asked me if I would kind of talk a little bit about that. So we're kind of going to go through it today, and hopefully you guys find it interesting and I can kind of piece some of it back to Plexus. Okay, so commonly referred to CBT, it's cognitive behavioral therapy. It's a psychosocial intervention that focuses on changing unhelpful thoughts, beliefs, attitudes, things like that. So whenever something happens and you have that thought that goes through your head, like just in a split second, you don't even have time to actually think about it. It just crosses your mind. That is considered your automatic thought. And that's kind of what CBT is made to change, so that you have helpful thoughts and more positive thoughts. But it was first practiced by a psychiatrist named Aaron Beck. So if you find that some of this stuff is helpful or you're wanting to learn more, you can always look it up. He's a good one to go to. So what he started noticing about whenever he was doing practice with clients is that they were having all of these thoughts, and they would actually have this dialogue in their mind. And whenever he was able to talk to them about it, then he was noticing that the thoughts and their feelings were linked together. So he started working on figuring out how he could change the therapy so that the clients could identify and understand the unhelpful thoughts that they were having. And like I said, they're automatic. We don't have a whole lot of control over what we think, but we can practice having more positive thoughts, and eventually the automatic thoughts become more positive. So that's what we're gonna kind of talk about working on. So Aaron Beck combined cognitive therapy along with some behavioral techniques to make those changes for his clients. And cognitive distortions, like I said, they are inaccurate thoughts that reinforce negative thought patterns. So we're kind of going to go through a few of the negative distortions that are most common, or at least from what I have read and seen and kind of experienced in my own life. So one of those is personalization. So personalization is pretty much just what it sounds like. So you are putting all the responsibility on yourself, like it's your fault. So as an example, if you arrive 5 minutes late to a meeting and then that meeting totally goes off the tracks, it's derailed, like there's lots of issues in that meeting, then if you're a person who would sit back and say, okay, well, I was 5 minutes late, so it must be my fault. Like that's why this meeting just totally took a negative turn. And if I would have only been there on time for this meeting, then it would have went fine. There would have been no issues. If you are a person who personalizes everything, like everything is your fault, even if it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with you, then that's one of your cognitive distortions that you might look at improving. Another one that I was going to talk about is shoulds. So if you are one that makes those should statements like, well, I should have been on time, or like with Plexus, I should have posted more, or I should have talked to this person. Just all of those should statements, kind of like what if also, then you're putting all of the pressure on you. You're getting upset because you have these unwritten rules for yourself, and then you're disappointed because you don't meet those rules, that sort of thing. So that's another cognitive distortion that a lot of people have. And I'm guilty of all of these, just so you're aware, which is part of the reason why I picked them out. Another big one is polarized thinking, or black and white. Like we all live life, right? And we all know that there's lots of circumstances, and if one circumstance changes, then it could be a totally different day type thing. Well, polarized thinking is it's black and white. It's either yes or no. There's no in between. And coming from a social work background, we have lots of gray area. That's always a big thing that we talk about. So, sometimes people think, oh, well, like for instance, Plexus, if I talked to that person and I didn't get them to sign up the first time I talked to them initially, then they're done. Like they're just off your list. No need to follow up because they're not interested. That's not necessarily the case. People need time to come around to things, and they might need more information or something like that. So they just need exposure. But by giving it the black and white thinking, then they're done. And it doesn't mean, you might look at that and say, well, I failed in that person, but just because they said no, you're not a failure. It's, again, they need more information. There's other things going on there. And there's an or a gray space for that. Another one is emotional reasoning, and that has to do with how you feel. If you feel a certain way, then that must make it true. If I feel like I'm not successful, then that means that I am not a successful person and cannot be a successful person. Or if, just I feel like I'm not smart enough to finish school or finish this class, then that would be your truth. Again, cognitive distortion. So that is not the case. Just because you feel that way does not make it true. And I feel like I am a very emotional person and can be a very emotional person. So I've really had to work on that one. Even with going back to school to get my master's, I had always said, I don't know if I'm smart enough to go back to school and get a master's degree, but it's okay. You just got to take it step by step, just like Kara talked about with Nehemiah, bite-sized pieces.
I feel like emotions are super deceiving. And if you allow them to become your reality, they can completely ruin everything. Just going back to last month when I was going for Diamond, Labor Day was rolling around and I still had like 30 orders left to get, and it was all afternoon and everybody's out with their families and nobody's like nobody's signing up or anything like that. And I'm like giving myself a pity party. Like, I just don't know if this is going to happen. Like, I don't know if I can make it work. And just like was really allowing my thoughts get the best of me at the time. I definitely had a support team around me that was very encouraging, like, quit worrying about it. Like, this is going to happen. And then the next day, like everything starts rolling in and we ended way over. So my thoughts at that time were definitely, my emotions at the time were definitely not my reality.
Yes, exactly. And then the last one that I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to go into a little bit more detail, is filtering. So filtering is when a person ignores the positive things that have happened and they only focus and dwell on those negative thoughts and feelings that they're having about whatever the situation is. And I feel like, especially, relating to plexus and kind of, again, what Kara was talking about earlier, like if you have someone who's telling you that you can't do it, or you have potential customers who are saying no, and you're not getting that one person to order that you're looking for that day, or, everyone's just saying no at the time, then it seems like that's what we dwell on and that's what we focus on. So I was actually listening to the radio. I listened to Air One, so it's a Christian radio station, and they had actually mentioned recently about how much we focus on negative thoughts. So I had to look up the statistics again of that so I could share them with you guys. But so 80% of the thoughts we have on a daily basis are negative. And even more alarming is that 95% of the thoughts that we have on a daily basis are actually the negative thoughts from like the day prior or the week prior. Like we just are repeating those same negative thoughts every day. So, I mean, whenever we talk about it, I feel like we're all probably sitting here thinking like, well, why would we want to do that to ourselves? Like, who wants to relive any negative situation? So to kind of get away from that, we're going to talk about how we can work on identifying your cognitive distortion, which again, part of that is education and just trying to be more aware and mindful of what you're thinking and how you're feeling. So identifying those cognitive distortions, and then we'll start to look at how we can change those and hopefully make them more positive. So going into that, we're going to talk about cognitive restructuring first. And that's just, again, a way of questioning those thoughts and trying to change those so that we are in more of a habit of having positive thoughts. And even if we have the negative thoughts, then we can question them and we can realize like, hey, even though I'm feeling like I'm not going to get that rank up, like I'm not going to get those points, here's where my points are now. Here's where my points are last month, and I can do this type thing. So we can be more realistic about what's going on and where we're at. Okay. So like I said, we're going to first, for the cognitive restructuring, we're going to identify what our negative thoughts are and what our feelings are related to that. Then we are going to, and also if you are really into this, I mean, I feel like I'm just kind of rambling, but anyway, if you're really into this and you want to know more about it, there are, if you just Google like cognitive restructuring, or just anything CBT related, really, you can find some worksheets, and you can actually have printable worksheets that you can print out and kind of go through if that is helpful to you. I really like worksheets and I like having physical stuff. So anyway, this is one that we'll look at. So you're just going to talk about what you are thinking, whatever your unhelpful thought is. Then you're going to just kind of weigh it out. What are the facts that are supporting this thought? So we'll take Kara's, for example, about last month and being nervous she wasn't going to make it to Diamond, which again, like she said, nobody around her thought that she wasn't going to make it. We all knew. So what were the facts supporting that thought for her? Do you remember? I'm putting you on the spot, I know.
At that time, it was just, nobody was signing up during those couple hours.
Okay.
So
So everyone was on vacation. No one was responding to her messages.
Yeah.
No orders were going in. Okay. So then we're going to look at the opposite side of it. What are the facts that contradict the thought? So if her thought was, I'm not going to make it to Diamond because I'm not going to get my points, what were the thoughts that contradict that? So meaning, what was saying you were going to get to Diamond?
that there actually were orders going in, just not enough at that time. And then my points were, I was meeting my daily points every single day that I had for myself.
All right. And then you also had everyone telling you that you're going to
Yeah.
meet it.
Yes. That
And
too.
looking at your points probably from last month and where you're at and how close you were, you could kind of judge that,
They were,
yes, you were on track and you're going to make it to Diamond. So just weighing negative and positive for that thought is helpful. And so then you just kind of take an inventory. Where do you have more evidence to support this thought? Do you have more evidence saying that your thought is true? Do you have more evidence saying that your thought is false?
at the time I had more evidence that my thought was false.
Okay. So then we can look at a different way of, cognitive restructuring, and we can just talk about writing positive statements about it. Even if they're super simple, like I am going to make it to Diamond. I am going to get my points. I am going to get this many orders for the day. It sounds simple and it sounds kind of silly, but there have actually been studies that prove that positive thinking does affect how we work on a day-to-day basis. So if nothing else, you can always just do those simple statements, writing them down, talking them out loud, whatever works best for you. The other worksheet that I like is the dysfunctional thought record. And this one goes into a little bit more detail about what the situation is, when did it occur, what was your automatic thought, your emotion attached to that. And then it also talks about an alternative thought. So if Kara's initial cognitive distortion was that she was not going to make it to Diamond, her alternative thought was just a simple, I am going to make it to Diamond. I'm going to get my points. But anyway, so it just kind of breaks it down a little bit more for you. I really like that, especially if you're finding that you're having a really tough day or a really tough time with anything, not just Plexus, just life in general. This is a good one to go to. And then there's also fact checking worksheets that, again, they're kind of, it seems silly just to kind of talk about it, but depending on how you're feeling and where you're at in life, it's nice to have. If you Google like CBT fact check sheet, it has a whole bunch of statements on it, like I am successful, I am I am successful, I am not pretty, just all kinds of simple statements that are good and bad. And then you just go through, there's a column that says fact, there's a column that says opinion. And so you just check off which one. And actually there's even an answer sheet on it, because things like I am pretty, well, that's an opinion. There's no fact to that. So sometimes that just kind of helps you get in check too of a better mindset. Just again, simple things like that. And then I know we're like running out of time here, but if you Google about positive emotions and how it affects our daily life. You'll find a whole bunch of interesting stuff too. One thing I'll share real quickly is just, I thought it was interesting when I was looking at all this and relating it back to Plexus. So as far as positive emotions, like interest and gratitude, those are the two positive emotions that help improve job satisfaction. And I feel like with Plexus, we can all agree that we have a lot of interest in the company, interest in the products, interest in the people, whether they're ambassadors or customers, we are interested. And then also gratitude. We have a lot of that too that I've noticed. So those two things, they increase job satisfaction. And I feel like that's why we're all satisfied too.
That is not, I've talked about going to the leadership excellence thing that Plexus sends all the jewels to back in November. And I feel like it was one of the times that my business completely changed after I went that. And I did not even realize that that's not what they called it at all. But until Whitney went through that with me, I was looking for the worksheet, but they made us do these exercises at Leadership Excellence. And they were talking about us as being a leader and as like trying to coach other people. What was the one thing that we felt was truth in our business that prevented us from moving forward? And they literally made us write down what that was, everything that she had just went through, and then find statements that were. And I came home after that and actually digging deep and realizing what the single thing was that I felt like that halted my leadership, what I felt like I was incapable of doing, being able to completely flip that around and start producing that and making that happen once. And you don't even necessarily realize it in your head. And at first I didn't even want to do it. I was like, I don't, these worksheets for me are like, I don't need this. And there was another girl at my table that was like, that just really encouraged me to take the time, because she says, if you didn't do it, it's going to continue to resurface itself. So, they made us break this down. And like I said, it completely changed my business. And I've been talking to Amanda and Bailey because they have the opportunity to go to that this week. Like, this is the one training that you guys have to go to, but it's going to help you overcome that. And she just did a run through on a lot of that right now. So, take some time and figure out what it is that might be hiccups in your own personal business and kind of move past that. Before we jump off here, I wanted to remind you guys that we have tips from the top going on in Show Me right now. Every single video that I have watched has been super good and super encouraging. So just take some time and do that. One of the biggest things in this business is personal development, and however you get that is going to continue to move that needle forward. So today was really good. Go back and watch today's. But besides that, we're going to have our weekly meeting on Thursday, our our product meeting that we have every single time. So be ready to like invite people to that, those 15-minute chat parties. And then we are going to put together another Jumpstart training soon as well, except it's just going to be a little bit different. But besides that, I will see you guys on Facebook and meet you guys here again next week. Bye, guys.